We've got a great deal of experience in our panel here today, and for mixed experiences in that sense, where Rowan or the Montague group, through Rowan's leadership, are building new facilities. James, through 9 Mile and the consolidation of the Thompson and Ajani families, have developed their already functioning facilities, and Andrew, through his involvement from Plunkett for some period now, have just completed an extensive build on a very large facility. So I'd like to set the scene on what we're going to talk about today, and provide some insights for what I see is generally our state of play within the industry. And there's when we talk about packing consolidation, and it's something that's been driven by overseas trends. It's been discussed for a long period of time by retailers and certainly by segments of the industry. But we generally haven't done a great deal when we measure against some of the activities, especially internationally. I'd suggest that there's been no measurable decline in traditional apple and pear packing facilities throughout Australia. We still have significant investment in labour, which remains a significant barrier to profitability and efficiency. Our present infrastructure is ageing. The new facilities that have been built have largely come about organically. There's certainly a lack of automisation and technology, and in recent times the introduction of technology has been driven largely by conditional supply agreements, where I talk about internal browning technologies. And in that, I'd suggest that there could even be some overcapitalisation in that space, where smaller operators are choosing to be involved in that NIR technology. But is that actually the right thing to be doing when we compare the efficiencies of potentially larger organisations? And there has been limited large-scale investment, as I spoke about, compared to other international outlooks, though there is significant investment planned going forward. So the aim of today and the discussion that I'm going to hopefully generate through our panel is to encourage we as growers to think about what is an efficient production and financially viable packing facility, and what it looks like in the future. And that in itself comes with challenges, and how do we capture the capacity? How do we prevent overcapitalisation? How do we develop trust and open, transparent relationships that cater for the future production and marketing trends and challenges, and that drive shared profitability? And I think that's one of the significant factors that we as greater industry need to understand and develop a platform where people can have trust and transparent in these sorts of structures. And with the insights of our panel, we'll certainly talk about the latest technologies and how we can potentially capture those for the greater good. And we've talked this morning about consistency in supply and quality, and potentially what we're going to discuss today will add some value back into that footprint as well. So our discussion is largely going to be an open view of what these three gentlemen are doing, have done, and potentially will be looking forward to. And certainly there's some key challenges in what's happened to date, and how we look at businesses like the three that I've mentioned will work forward on. And gentlemen, for your points of view, and I'll start with James, just because you're the most advanced in this space so far. The packing facility that you're operating now, is that something that if you were doing again would look similar to what it does today, considering what you know and the world travel that you've participated in over years prior to your establishment of the facility you have against what you have today, and knowing what you have today, and that may lead into other conversations in regard to what Andrew's done and what Montague's through Rowan's leadership are about to do. So if you had your time again, what would your facility look like? Would it look the same as it does today?
Well, it looks similar, Chris. Going back to the start, the reason was we needed to upgrade, and the Thompson family needed to upgrade. So we sort of looked at the whole overview of the business from what did the growers need, what did the retailers need, and then put it into the plan for the shed. We went around the world, the US, New Zealand, Europe, and obviously came up more so with the European method with our rising labour costs and whatnot. So getting back to your original question of the way we've set it up and the flow, we took all that into account, and it made us nimble, able to react to the market. We're in the process now of 16 robotic packers coming in, which should be in around May, June. So again, we're concentrating on the efficiencies, reducing labour. So whether I do it the same, yes, bit of tinkering here and there, new technologies coming on, so we just keep going down with the flow.
So clearly your business platform and the need for greater technology is not stopping. You're reinvesting continually from learnings throughout the world.
We're hungry for technology, so we need to do it as efficiently and as cost effectively as possible, and that involves technology.
Your organisation's a very open and I would suggest transparent structure and there's been many tours and visits through your buildings, and I would assume equally by Andrew and Rowan in learning from what you've done. You've maintained an open platform on how the industry can grow collectively through this process.
We're all in one big industry, and the apple industry has for many years been disjointed and people doing different things. So, for the good of the industry, we need an open book. We need to be transparent. We need to be communicating with growers, retailers, back in the shed. It's a wholesome approach.
Andrew, knowing what you've done in what I'd say a short period of time, a significant investment in both production and handling and storage, you're about to embark on a 9-mile type platform. You've obviously looked at what's been happening within Australia and potentially all around the world. How do you see your footprint against what's already operating here, and do you see any significant differences in what you're doing against what's already happening here? Is there a point of difference?
I think we're both following the European model, and to James's point about technology, is the first step is to pre-size to take advantage of any robotic packing. You need to be dealing with one type and grade and size of fruit. So I think on that fundamental basis, we're pretty similar. You need to pre-size a fruit first and then see what technology is available to you to get it in the box.
Andrew's more involved as the pears. He's got the pears as well,
Yeah,
so there's a point of difference there.
And then I think fundamentally for James and I and Rowan, I guess we're all sourcing fruit from essentially Victoria, southern Australia. So we're all dealing with similar varieties, similar grades. So that's probably obvious why we end up with similar machines.
And Rowan, your business, the Montague business, is renowned for travelling the world, looking at alternatives to the current practices. You've done that for a very long period of time. You're similarly following a European model with the development of your new enterprise, which has very recently turned dirt.
Oh, look, I mean, I think the whole thing with packing is it becomes pragmatic. Like I feel like where we went to, and I'm sure these guys did the same, is it's like you're renovating a house and you go in and you renovate the bathroom and then you go, well, bloody hell, the kitchen looks really awful now, and you renovate that and then you go, well, now the lounge room looks terrible. And I don't think it's any different with packing. I just think we got to the point where the more we toured around and the more we looked at things, we just realised for the next 100 years, or we last did a massive build in 1984 or something, and we just said, look, this is a once in a generation. The time for patching up has passed. We've got the volume of fruit. We just need to start again. And so, yes, of course, you go around and you look at what everyone else is doing, just as you do when you're looking for a house or you're looking for any sort of investment, and you pick the best parts out of what people are doing around the world and you arrive at the answer. And look, we're going to make mistakes, but you use the best information that's available at the time.
And Rowan, what does your business envisage the labour force looks like in your facility once it's completed? Is there a measure on what you potentially believe is the metric between a pack carton and a labour unit compared to what you're doing now?
Oh, look, I mean, I don't. The interesting thing is when you start. For us, I don't think we're going to make a massive amount of savings in labour. I think our goal will be to utilise the labour that we have, but to get more productivity out of that labour. And I think the notion of getting away from labour altogether is probably not something that we're going to see. What we are going to see is a change in the nature of labour. So we're going to see fewer unskilled packers, and we're going to see a lot more equipment operators. We're going to see a lot more IT capability. We're going to see a whole lot more technicians who are managing equipment, that sort of stuff. So I think we're seeing a transition in the pack house away from unskilled labour to very skilled, and that's actually from an HR point of view going to be great for our industry, because in terms of the talent that we can attract to our pack houses and can work in like a manufacturing, we're going to get some smart people in, and that's going to help us. So I think what I'm looking at is the amount of labour that I have to expend, or the expenditure on labour per kilo of fruit produced, and that's the measure that we're really looking at. And right now we know that it's too high relative to the value that we get for our product. We need to reduce that labour cost, and we will, but it's going to be by packing more fruit using a labour hour rather than just saying we're not going to have people there.
And Andrew, is that your sentiment as well in how you've developed your structure?
Yeah, definitely. And I think to Rowan's point about the upskilling of people, I mean, you can see that's the obvious next shortage when you do a project. What you soon realise is it's difficult to teach fruit people electronics. We have to find good IT electronics people and teach them about fruit. So it does definitely bring in a new type of person to the business.
And James, being that you've been in this space for a few years now, what have you found? Where are the savings in your business, knowing that you've been operating and working towards knowing a little more about the operations of these significant investments? What's your labour input?
Well, as Rowan said, we've definitely, our labour force has changed, a different skill set, but to Rowan's point, with any business, that the unit cost of the output of each individual is a lot higher than what it was. So, the exact same thing.
I think it's also important to point out that a lot of the benefit comes from being able to make a different or better product, or what the product the customer needs, evaluating what's in each bin of fruit.
Yeah, and look, I think I'd also add, just in relation, I think we can get really obsessed about the pack house, but I think it's actually the whole system that we're talking about. So it's, you look at 9 Mile or Plunkett's, or certainly what we're doing, the investment that we're making in, superior loading docks, better cool rooms, functionality, solar panels, all of that sort of stuff. It's easy to say, I'm going to put in a new piece of kit, but I actually think you've got to look at your whole supply chain and say, there is a big gap between I pick a bin of fruit in an orchard somewhere in Australia and I get it to the customer around the world. You have to look at that holistically and say, we've got to undo that and put it back together, because just putting new kit in doesn't necessarily change anything if the dynamics of how your building is set up, and that was certainly our experience. We had to basically abandon our building because it didn't matter what we did with the equipment, we couldn't turn a poorly designed building into a building that was going to be efficient. So we had to start again.
It's a good point to talk to, and you're right. It's not just about a piece of kit. It is about food safety and efficiencies in all the aspects that you've just spoken about. We've spoken earlier today about the consistency of product within our supply chains. Certainly the responsiveness that we've already talked about with 9 Mile. Reporting trust and industry politics are one that I believe are going to be a very difficult challenge going forward. And when I look at the information briefs that you've all been kind enough to present to me, there's 30-odd people or 30-odd organisations working within your organisation as grower suppliers, and clearly you'll be wanting to have that grow to drive greater efficiencies. How have you developed that information stream, that trust stream, that transparency backwards from your packing facility to gain greater trust in what you're doing, greater participation in what you're doing? And for you, James, it's a question because you've been in this space for a little while longer than everyone else. How have you developed that stream of information that's given people confidence that you're the right fit for them?
Oh, well, and we're ever evolving in that as well. Obviously you're providing information to retailers. You've got your sales guys there. It needs to be on the back end as well with the growers, and this all leads to new varieties and the development of new varieties coming through. It's not just for the orchards, our own orchards, our growers' orchards to be profitable. It's also for the guarantee of fruit coming through those facilities as well. You mentioned overcapitalisation earlier, with the commodity type lines and maybe 6 super sheds or whatever down the track. It does pose that question. So you've always got to be looking, understanding of what everyone along the whole chain is looking for from you.
And that in itself poses another question. In the Goulburn Valley, we have something like 70 cool store packing facilities. There's obviously a significant investment just across the 3 organisations that we're presenting here today. There's other planned investments to take place or have already taken place in some capacity or another. So it's been argued for many years that packing facilities in a region like the Goulburn Murray Valley are inefficient because of the stretch, how many are are here and how little work they're doing over a 12-month period. If a state like Victoria develops the planned infrastructure that's spoken about and has been spoken about for some time, is there potential for exactly the same outcome to be in place, where larger facilities are inefficient because there isn't enough production to actually go through them, just as we're talking about 70 different packing sheds and cool stores operating in the Golden Murray Valley having that same problem today? Yeah. And I'd like a view from you all in that space.
Look, I think it's interesting. Harvey and I had a great dinner last night, and we've solved the problems of the world last night. I decided, Harvey, we're going to have robots assessing our quality assurance and our maturity, and we also discussed the changes in the needs of the next generation of fruit growers. So, Harvey was talking a lot about his history, and the Montague history is the same. What Bill was prepared to do, Bill Montague, he was prepared to run his own orchard, go to market every day, run his pack house and do all of that himself. But I just think the next generation of people, so I'm what they call a Gen Xer, but the millennials, there's no way that they are going to do all of that work. They are going to say, I want a work-life balance. And I think certainly what we see offshore is that, and we've talked about professionalisation, it's going to be, I think, and not everyone will do this because there'll be some Italian families who still are prepared to do that, but I generally do believe, and that's certainly something that gave us courage to do the construction, was there's people who just want to grow and they want to wave goodbye to that bin and they want to know that they've got someone who's doing those other jobs. And that's what's going to, I think, transform. And we certainly saw that in Washington State, in the US, and that was certainly something that we saw. I mean, there used to be many more pack houses, many more storage, and now you've got consolidation and professionalisation. And I think it's been driven by economic forces, but also social forces. And that is what that generation of people actually, what they want their job to be. And they don't want to work 24/7. They don't want to drive to market. They don't want to do all of those things. Some people will continue to do that, but I think there has to be room for those changes in the very structure of our society and our industry in terms of what people want to do as a job.
I think also there's so much more involved in every step of growing fruit now. There's so much more expectation, compliance, that going forward it's going to be really tough to be across all sections effectively, and so it's going to be almost impossible to do what the previous generations have done and do it all.
And I agree with you. There's certainly a greater need for statutory requirements to be fulfilled. There's everyone's worried about food safety, and we've been isolated that as apple and pear growers, but there's certainly segments of fresh produce that have had difficulties throughout the world and Australia in regard to food safety, and the health and safety issues of our people and the like. But it's an interesting point you make, Rowan, where socially and economically there's a changing of the guard on how people think about what they do and how they operate their businesses. And that probably will be pleasing to the retailers in the room and their outward thinking of how quality is going to be provided to our supply chains. What do you all see in that quality space? How do you see a measurable capacity by super sheds or consolidated packing facilities? I shouldn't say sheds. Consolidated packing facilities to actually improve the outcomes and lift our presence and profile within Australia, let alone internationally.
I think the step to robotics definitely helps you make a more consistent product. So one of the problems we all have now is that each individual staff member has a different idea of what's in and what's out, and their opinion at 9 o'clock is different to 3 o'clock, and therefore we can tend to make inconsistent products. So that's one thing I guess that the technology can help us with, is getting a more consistent product out each day.
Andrew, are we ready for it though? And James, this might be a question for you, being that you've been in this space longer. Have you been willing to accept the automation that possibly fills a juice bin quicker than you would have expected it to do? Has that been a challenge for your business on how automation has taken those choices away from you in regard to what's first class, what's second class, and what's juice?
Oh, look, working with a lot more volume, obviously you might think a juice bin's filling up quicker. Everyone can't stand walking through a pack house and looking in a juice bin, that's for sure. I think a lot of it is dependent on the customers as well, and where they're going to be headed down the track. Do they want more help category managing the category? Do they want consolidation? Getting back to the point, it's always stressful work walking through any packing shed just to see what's going on. But no, you've got to trust, and the results of we've been more than happy.
And your experiences, are your 30-odd grower suppliers willing participants to be a part of your structure? Is that an invitation type environment where they come through and look at what's happening through your facilities to have a greater involvement and a greater transparency to what you're doing?
There's nothing more than we love than to have a grower come and watch his fruit be pre-sized, packed, and to get that understanding, rather than it's been loaded on a truck at harvest and that's the end of the matter. So yeah, it's all encompassing to understand the whole process, what we do, where issues may lie, and communication.
And Andrew and Rowan, you wouldn't see it any different in the business models that you have presently?
No, that's right. To James's point, it's the most important thing for growers to see what they've actually grown when it gets to a sorting table, because most bins of fruit look okay as they leave the orchard.
I think also, we talk about future orchards and we talk about yield, and the tonnage of product that we are dealing with now. It used to be that we had very small holdings of farms, and the orchardist really made the decision, well, orchards by their very nature have got bigger, the hectares have got bigger, and the tonnage you have to trust your numbers at every level of the whole supply chain. So you have to trust that your maturity data's right, you have to trust that your number of fruit counts that you've put on a tree to get the size that you want is right, and you have to trust what your pack out equipment says. And I think that works its way through to your service provider. So if someone's providing packing, then there has to be an element of trust, because if that's not there and you don't have a system that's transparent, then that all falls down. So we are automating. We've got far more data, and it's really about that data sharing that I think you've got the capacity to in every facet of the supply chain now. And that visibility is something that we all have to provide, because the days of, here's a bin return, but I can't tell you, what I got out or they're gone. Now it's about, because you need your growers to get better, and the only way they're going to get better is to give them really solid data about how their fruit packed out and what its quality was like and what its size was like, because then they can make changes further up the chain that's going to help them next time.
So Rowan, question for you all, but you've brought it forward. Rowan, do you have a mechanism in the Montague structure that provides a benchmark for growers throughout your supply chain that they can engineer a better outcome through your agronomy services and information transfer? How do you bring your people to an acceptable level? Because they won't be all tier one growers as such. You'll all have different variations of grower suppliers and quality and alike. Is it a function of your businesses to bring your people forward so they're all at an operational and respectable level that drives profitability, and how do you do that?
So I think that is actually a little bit untouched still globally, and you know, I think the whole development of managed varieties, which James talked about, the whole notion that by collaboration you can actually get a whole lot of better data together, and I think benchmarking now is not necessarily limited to just the Goulburn Valley or Australia even. With some of these programs you can do benchmarking with Washington State or New Zealand, and as that data comes forward, you've got that data, you can share the benchmark, but I think the challenge that we have is, yes, you can share the data, but how do you actually change the process? Because what someone can do in Washington in their conditions or what someone can do in Shepparton in their conditions is different from what Batlow looks like or Tasmania. So you can take some principles and you can see what can be achieved, but you've also got to find a way, and that's through a lot of agronomy services in the field to say, well, what is achievable in your place? So there's always got to be that translation that goes on, but I think now we have some base data that can say, well, you know, this is possible in this country, and certainly with the Jazz, we find that a lot. The difference between the highest yielding, best performed Jazz grower and the poorest is massive. And sometimes those growers who are really struggling just need to have the opportunity to go and see what someone else has done, and just to talk with them for some time, and that will transform what they're doing. Or they just have to wait because it's all about timing and all of those things. But that technology exchange is to change the behaviour is a long-term process, and something I wouldn't say we've worked out, but we're getting there.
And as Andrew would probably be saying now, the pre-sizing figures, which is different to a pack-out report, that is telling you the information. That was in second grade because it was under colour. That was it's giving you a lot more detailed description of which our agronomy team then send out to the grower, which is independent of a pack-out.
You'd agree, Andrew?
I think it's also important to remember that Rowan mentioned it, that there's no one model fits all, because all of the growers are at different levels. Some are quite high, and some have got a lot of work to do. Some young orchards, some old orchards. So it's important that we don't roll out a one size fits all. You must get to here, and this is the sweet spot, because every business has a different sweet spot. So it's about us fine tuning that.
And I don't disagree at all, but being that there's such an opportunity to capture a lot of data in organisations that are being developed around this investment, I see it's a great opportunity to actually drive backwards, not reinvent the wheel, but actually add true value back to your supply base.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that, you know, all three of us are going with pre-size, and I think that's the attraction, is straight away you get a really detailed report of what was in this bin of fruit that was submitted, and then you can see that, and you can't argue with what the equipment says. It's the same. Everyone's being judged upon the same criteria, and so you're getting that feedback as to what you have to work on.
Thank you. I'll open up for questions for the last few minutes of our presentation, but just before I do, I'll just give you an idea of the scope of the businesses that our three panellists are developing. So they've all moved away from commit to pack type production lines, and in no order. So the Plunkett organisation is going to have a current capacity of 70,000 bins with a yet to be utilised 60,000 bins, and they have a grower supplier base of 30 members, and present storage capacity of 26,000 bins, and they have a continuing investment strategy, both orchard production and secondary storage. So and clearly, when you get it to have a look around the Goulburn Valley, Andrew's been investing heavily in both those spaces. Rowan and the Montague group, again, I've had a commit to pack line for very many years, as Rowan's talked about. Their facility has just turned dirt and is to be operational in December 2020. So Rowan, your organisation has a lot of work to do.
We do.
A lot of work to do.
Thanks for reminding me.
Daily capacity of 380 bins, producing 9,000 crates in every 8-hour shift. Initial capacity of 60,000 bins, with a capacity once fully utilised of 100,000 bins, and incidentally a grower-supplier network of 30, and a present storage capacity on site of 25,000 bins. And 9 Mile, running four packing lines. It's a consolidation of the Thompson and Ajani families. 10,000 unit capacity in an 8-hour shift. Current bin throughput of 65,000, yet to be utilised 35,000 bins. Grower supply network of 35, and a current capacity of 35,000 bins, and continue to invest in automation, as we've just heard, with greater robotics and further storage technologies. So that's just an overview of the significant investment that's taking place by these three organisations alone, let alone what's being planned. And I would expect there'd be many questions that would come from the floor, and I open up now to anyone that might have a question going forward. Kevin.
Interest's sake, in that each of you have gone the European system, and yet, we all travel to America and we all see the commit to pack lines are bigger and better than perhaps anywhere else in the world, and yet none of you have gone again down that path. Do you think there was some reason why you chose the pre-size movement against the commit to pack? There must be something significant. The three of you have done it together, and they're very different organisations, and you've all travelled, as we all have, and it's just a complete difference from what you see in America versus what you see in Europe.
Well, the US, I was over 2 or 3 months ago, and historically their labour costs have been right down there, that they weren't an issue. But now, visiting the last time, the labour's starting to, it's all about the labour cost, is starting to increase. There was a number of pre-sizes that had popped up since the last time, and they were all talking about automation.
It's hard to automate commit to pack lines, and I think the many varied pack types we have here, different supermarkets with different crates, lends itself to pre-sizing, and then the wax versus no wax argument.
Oh, look, it's a really fascinating question, because they had a lot of pre-size in the US when I first went there, and they took it all out and went to commit to pack. I think it's a little bit like you always think the grass is greener, if I'm honest. And I think, they're now, as James said, they're now reflecting upon what they thought they were going to get and did they really get it, and maybe questioning that. And I think also that just the sheer volume, I think the thing that's probably drove us is we got so many SKUs and so many different orders, and just the order sizes, that it was killing us the amount of packed cartons that we then had to rework. So our challenge is definitely going to be making sure we move through those pre-sized bins in a fashion. And I think what happened in the US is they lost the discipline to do that. And so they said, we want pack stock, because then our salesmen will sell it. It was a big investment to make their salesmen sell packed stock, is broadly where I fall on the difference.
But you make a good point. There is so many SKUs, and as we all innovate, that could even potentially
it's not going to get any less. It's going to get more and more.
So unless you're driving flexibility or nimbleness into your operations, then you'll never be a service provider of any value.
No, and look, you go to a US big commit to pack shed in the US, and to change over from one variety to another takes hours to do, because the graders are so big. Well, for us, we would have had to put in 6 commit to pack lines to get through what we needed to in one day. It just wasn't practical.
BC.
BC Oladele from Jeff Thompson. Now, I know that as business people, the first thing in our mind is to make profit. But at the same time, we live in community. And there's always these two school of thoughts that you can run your equipment efficiently and make money, and then possibly then put the money back into the community. Or the other way is to think of your community when you're thinking of your workforce. In that way, you're still holding on to those ones, the older workforce that are not ready to upskill, and you see it as a commitment to your community to still keep those ones in your workforce. So when you are thinking of the skill or the workforce within your business, for James, I know you're already in that part, in that journey. I don't know what you guys did. Did you have to upskill? Did you have to recruit and then lose your culture within the business? And for Andrew and Rowan, who are going in that way, what's your plan with regards to your workforce that automation will be required?
Thank you, BC.
Okay. Well, I think that one of the positive things out of new technology is it gives people a career path. I think one of the problems with horticulture up until now is we have a lot of production staff and we don't necessarily have a very good career path for people to move up the ladder. So I think as we get more technology and there's more and more skills to learn, I think we offer a higher percentage of people a career path rather than a production job for life.
Yeah, I think you asked a really sensible question in relation to, what you do with staff. We've actually we started last week, implemented a change program within the business because we got so much change, a new building, new equipment, all of that. And so there's two things you've got to consider. One is practically, are they physically able to do that? Which is a little bit easier because you can do a physical assessment, but are they emotionally and ready to make that change? And so we're going to go through that process. I think we're also, as I said, I don't see the numbers change, and we'll still have that, but I totally agree with what Andrew said. The most exciting thing for some of these people, if they've been doing the same job in the same way for so long, and now suddenly there's a whole range of jobs that they can do, and for some of them that's exciting. Some of them will struggle and we'll have to work with them, but I think we underestimate people's desire to be involved and excited by their work. And packing, anyone who's packed on a line for a long time knows that it's a difficult job and it's monotonous. So if we can continue to get interest and get investment in new processes, then so I think it's about trying to change the way in which they look at the change and talk about it as opportunities rather than, you are now redundant and you don't have a role to play. And so retraining is definitely something we'll work on.
Well done. Anything further before we close for lunch? Harvey.
We invested in a pre-sizer 10 years ago now this year, and one of the things that we invested in that system for was to obviously reduce cost and save labour. We thought we were probably going to have less people, but in fact we didn't have one less person in the pack house. But what did happen is we went from 200 kilograms per person per hour to 400 to 500 kilograms per person per hour. So in fact, we actually halved our labour cost. The other thing that I'd like to say is technology is a must. And I say to my people at home that technology allows us to stay in business. Without technology and advancement, you cannot hope to stay in business indefinitely. So you have to move with technology and change to just keep your status quo. We always hope that what we invest in will return us more money, but the bottom line is it keeps you in business, and the hope is that the investment also will make a better return for you, but the primary point is investment keeps you in business.
Thanks, Harvey. It's a good comment to come from the floor and come from the experience. And BC is a very community-minded person, and her view would be, or it clearly is, that there's a worry that there'll be less people employed because of automation and alike. And clearly that's not the case in your organisation. and I believe that that's the message that we're actually getting from our panel members as well. It's the amount of productivity we're getting per person rather than having less people for a productivity gain.
I'd just like to make one more comment, is the pre-size system allows us to move our staff around the pack house so they're not doing one job consistently for 6 or 8 hours. I'm pretty sure it's 1 hour and then they rotate to another station in the pack house, whether it's on the pre-sizer or on the pack line or on the stacking line. So we have a rotation policy of, pretty sure it's every hour, if it's not, definitely every 2 hours. All our staff move around the pack house.
Good. Thank you. If there's nothing further, then I'd just like to take the opportunity to thank you for your participation today, and equally many thanks to James, Andrew and Rowan for their open conversation and participation today in this very worthwhile conversation. So thanks very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thanks.